guys, I'm PUTSY and welcome back to my channel. And for today's video, I'm going to do one of the most famous video that a lot of people's been doing for the past few weeks, which is, as you can see from the title, Mid-Year Book Freakout Tag. I originally wanted to make a mid-year wrap-up kind of video because one, I'm pretty new to this book type of content videos, so I have never made any type of book wrap-up video before, and two, I haven't read that many books from January to June, so I figured I might be able to condense everything into one video and make like a mid-year wrap-up. But these past few weeks I've been watching book tag video all over YouTube and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun to listen to and maybe to make one myself as well, so I decided at last minute that I'm going to make this book tag video instead of that wrap-up. But I'm going to list every single book that I've read so far at the end of the video, just in case maybe you also want to know that. And from January to June, so far I have read 16 books. I know it's not much compared to a lot of other people's reading list and progress, but for me it's honestly really crazy that I'm able to do that, because before 2021 usually I only read like maybe 5 at the maximum a year. So originally when I started 2021, my goal was to consistently read at least one book every single month, so 12 books a year. But after February, I realized that I fell in love with book all over again, and I decided instead of reading 12 books, I aimed a bit higher. And on Goodreads for my 2021 reading challenge, my goal is to read 25 books, and I'm already halfway past my goal in June, so that's like a really great progress. But I have a hunch, I think the last part of 2021 will be even better. We'll see. But yeah, that's just a little bit of backstory of my reading progress so far. Now let's get into the first question of the book tag. I have all of the questions here on my iPad, so I'm so sorry if I look down maybe quite a bit in this video. First question is, best book you've read so far in 2021? This is one of the easiest answer that I can give to for this book tag, and that is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I just posted my reading vlog for this book. I'm not the type of person who can easily cry during a reading, even though I consider myself to be quite an emotional person. I have a hard time showing emotion in front of a lot of people, but I am quite emotional. But in terms of reading, I haven't been able to actually cry during a reading, and this was the closest I came to a cry. It was so sad towards the end. It was like a roller coaster of emotion. I felt sad, I felt happy, I felt angry, I felt frustrated, I felt inspired. So many emotions all at once. This is a story about true love, about someone who's willing to do anything to make her dream come true, to survive in a cruel world where there's only a small possibility for Evelyn to succeed in life, but she fought back, she worked hard until she finally able to make it in Hollywood. Time and time again, her strength was challenged, and time again she succeeded, back on her feet again, rise back from the ashes and everything, just like a phoenix. Evelyn Hugo as a character is a very fascinating character to read, and I have to keep reminding myself when I read this book that Evelyn Hugo is not a real person, just because Taylor Jenkins Reid portraying a very unique, complex character while making them still very much realistic and feel close to my heart as I read them. She's powerful, she's ambitious, but she also have made a lot of mistakes in her career. She's a little bit selfish at times, but she admits when she made mistakes. She admits when she used other people for her advantage. She owned up to her mistakes, and that I think is quite charming, even though I don't always agree with her choices. And every single character in this book is also very intriguing. There's not one character that I feel like is just a filler, and every single page in this book is a page turner. Not once that I felt any kind of boredom reading these books. Honestly, I will give this book 10 stars out of 5 stars. It is that good. Kind of wanted to reread this now in 2021, but I'm going to hold off on that and save this for maybe early 2022 or something. And yeah, this is the best book so far, and I'm pretty sure it will stay in one of my favorite book ever for a long time, maybe even forever. Second question is best sequel you've read so far in 2021. I haven't read a lot of sequel. I think I only read two, An Ember in the Ashes series and the Serpent and Dove series. Like, I really like both of them, but hands down An Ember in the Ashes is one of my favorite. It's so good. I actually wanted to read this mainly because of Jenny from The Story Ends Over. She loved this. This always made into her top favorite list video, favorite fantasy, favorite series, favorite books, whatever. So I always kind of intrigued just because of the way she described this book. And by this time I'm filming this, I have read the third book of the series, and the series have 4 books, and I cannot wait to finish this series soon. But so far I will give the first 2 5 stars hands down, and the third book sadly is a little bit of a letdown compared to the first 2, even though it's still really good. I still really like them, but I give the third book maybe around 4.2 to 4.5 stars, just because I don't know, it feels a little bit too much on the war side. And I really love this book because it's so thrilling. The world building is amazing. The world is so rich and full of character. Sabata here has her own way to paint the picture quite clear and very richly in my head. And I've read enough book in this series to know that Sabata here has a beautiful way in shocking us along the way. There are a lot of unexpected twists, but if I look back on what I've read so far, every single piece of information, Sabata here already planted all the seeds, sprinkled everything. When you first read them, it seems kind of unimportant, but later on you'll find out that all of those side information turned out to be a very important, shocking twist in the end. You have to read and experience this yourself to know what I mean. If you haven't read this series, I really encourage you to do so because it honestly is so good. One of my favorite series that I've read so far. The third question is new release you haven't read yet but want to. So I have 2 that really jumped out at me when I tried to list down my answer. And the first one is Malibu Rising from Taylor Jenkins Reid, and the second one is Ace of Spades by Farida Abike Limide. I know I'm pronouncing her name wrong, so I'm sorry for that. I just put in my order for these 2 books from Book Depository, so I know they won't be here for quite some time because Book Depository usually takes like 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes even more, to arrive here, so I know they won't be here for a while. So Malibu Rising, it's by Taylor Jenkins Reid. She is the writer of The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. It's been highly talked about specifically because it's very much like a summer read, so it's like the perfect timing for that book. Also, the story is about the kids of Mikriva, who is one of the husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I called him stupidly funny in my reading vlog, and if you have read Evelyn Hugo, you'll know what I mean. He's a rock star and he's so full of himself, and I cannot picture him as a father. And from what I can gather so far about Malibu Rising, he's not a very good father. He's not very present in his children's life, and we'll see how that affects his children. And the story takes place in a day. I think this kid is preparing to have a big party in their house, so we'll see the preparation leading up to the party, what happened to the parties, and I think also afterwards. I don't know, but a lot of people said it's a really good book, but it's not as spectacular as Evelyn Hugo, so I have to lower my expectation a bit. But Evelyn Hugo really is a fantastic book. If it's come even closer to that, I think it will still be a good read. And I have high hopes in Taylor Jenkins Reid writing because I trust her. She's amazing in my opinion. And Ace of Spades is kind of a mixture of Gossip Girl and Get Out. I think I haven't watched Get Out or read, I don't know if it's a book or a movie, but I have watched Gossip Girl obviously, and it's one of my absolute favorite TV series. I know it's not like story wise, it's not amazing or anything, but it's just a really fun series to watch. It's one of my favorite series growing up. So that line alone, the fact that it will be somewhat similar to Gossip Girl, already makes me really excited to read this. And the other reason is because the cover. Honestly, the US cover version, it's one of the most beautiful cover I've seen, and if that reflects anything about the book, then I have high hopes. So yeah, I cannot wait for those two books to arrive so I can finally read them, hopefully before 2021 ends. Next question is most anticipated release for the second half of the year, and my answer is For Gods and Monsters by Shelby Mahurin and Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. First, Gods and Monsters, it's one of the other series that I've read so far in 2021. Wait, I also read another series, which is Crescent City, but the second book of that series isn't out until 2022, so that doesn't count. Really cannot wait to see the ending, the final book of the Serpent and Dove series. I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about this series, but I personally loved it. I thought it was amazing. I actually really liked the second book a little bit more than the first one, even though the first one is very much more easy, like comfort read type of thing. It's much more romance centric, but the second one is a little bit more heavy in the plot. I really like the magic system in there, quite complex. We have two different kinds of witches with different types of magic. Also have this witch hunter who then fall in love with this witch, and their love for each other have to fight this desire of the witch hunter to hate on the witches and everything. And then there's also a lot of other backstory of who they are, and they have to overcome and somehow survive their relationship despite all of the craziness that surrounds them and everything. And it's just very fun to read, in my opinion. So I cannot wait to see the ending. I hope it will be as good, if not better, than the rest of them. It will be out, I think, in the first part of August, so it's not long till the release, and I cannot wait. So the second book that I'm excited about is Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. A lot of people rave about House in the Cerulean Sea. I personally haven't read that, but I have ordered the book. They just haven't arrived yet. It already makes me so excited to read his next book. I think this book will be as amazing, if not better, than The House in the Cerulean Sea, and that makes me so excited. So yeah. Biggest disappointment. I have two that came in mind, but there are for two completely different reasons, and they are full. I don't know why I'm holding this weirdly. First one is Full Disclosure by Cameron Garrett, and the second one is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. So let's talk about this book first. I have quite a high hope for this, not that because I've heard anything amazing about this book. To be completely honest, I haven't heard a lot of people talking about this book, but I saw this in my local bookstore and I saw the cover. It looks amazing. The cover is quite striking, and like I said, if I thought the cover is good, there's a high chance that the book itself will be amazing. And then I read the summary in the back and it sounds really promising. Simon has got high school down. She's made friends, she's directing the school musical, and she's making out with Miles, the most attractive boy in school. She's also HIV positive, and that complicates things because last time she told someone, the fallout was devastating. And when... wait, I said Simon. I think it's supposed to be Simone. And when Simone finds an anonymous threat in her locker threatening to turn her world upside down, she begins to wonder if the only way to rise above is to face the haters head on. So there's a lot of great topic that this book touched on: HIV positive and how the prejudice towards them, how a lot of people feel very wrongly about HIV positive. It's also talked a little bit about race and also LGBTQ, and how the kid, as in Simone, who grew up with two dads, and will see their dynamic and everything. It's like all the premise sounds very promising, and I have high hopes that it will be like an impactful read for me, but it felt kind of flat. They touch on a lot of topics, but they don't really dig deep into the emotional side of it, and I don't really connect to any of the character. And even though I still remember the story, it doesn't really linger. Like there's no feeling lingers in me. A lot of the moments in this book felt kind of rushed. They touch on this topic, but then they move on kind of quickly to another topic, but then before we learn more or connect to that particular story, we move on to other things. Also, I think they don't give us a lot of backstory. This book still have a couple of great moments in it, don't get me wrong, but like I said, most of the book felt kind of rushed and I just have a hard time connecting to it, which is kind of a bit of a shame because I had really high hope for this. We'll move on to the second book, which is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. It's not a bad book whatsoever, but this doesn't meet my expectation, which is quite high, way higher than the previous book. Unlike the other book, this is like highly talked about, not just because of the book itself, but also because of Matt Haig is a very well-known writer who wrote a ton of books that a lot of people love. Based on the premise of the story, it felt really compelling. It's about the Midnight Library. Obviously, the Midnight Library is a place that exists between life and death, and that place stored all the different versions of our life that we didn't able to live through. So it's like kind of a simple version of multiverse or something like that. If you watch The Flash, they all exist, but we just only able to live one version of our life. And so when we get to this Midnight Library, we're able to try out all the other versions. In a lot of cases, this book did meet my hope that it has a lot of reminder of life, that you know the best version of our life is the life that we get to live through. If we make different choice, that doesn't always mean it will be happier or it will be worse. It will just be different, and at the end of the day, that can make that life more enjoyable and more happy to live in is if we make the change ourselves, not necessarily the life that needs to be changed, but our actions and our response to the life that we have. And that I really need to hear, which is why I still able to give this book 4.2 stars, but I just kind of hoping this will be even more spectacular than that. I mean, this book itself is quite short. It only has 270 something pages, but at some point this book feels kind of long just because of it feels a little bit repetitive, especially in the middle. Nora, the main character, lived through the different version, and Nora herself experienced more than 100 versions of her life. It must get a little bit boring at some point, and that I also felt when I read this book, which is kind of weird because usually the middle and the end part of the book is usually when I like the book more, but in this book I like the first and the very last part of the book more than the middle part. But nonetheless, I still really like this book, just not as amazing as I hoped. Next is Biggest Surprise, which is this one, Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. I mean, this is actually called House of Earth and Blood, and Crescent City is the series, but I'm used to call this Crescent City. So again, I bought this on a whim because I saw the cover and I thought this is one of the most beautiful cover I've ever seen. So I decided to pick this up. At that point, I wasn't really into reading this much. I love reading books, but I'm not an avid reader before 2021. So when I read this, I was hoping it will be good, but I didn't think that it will be life-changing because this book sparks my love for book all over again. The reason why I love book, I think for the same for a lot of people, is Harry Potter books. Harry Potter made me love reading books, but Harry Potter made me love reading Harry Potter, if that makes any sense. Like, every time I want to read books, I tend to gravitate towards more Harry Potter books. I just want to reread them all over again. So when I found this book, I caught myself wanting more fantasy books because this is so exciting. The romance is so good, the fantasy aspect, the world building, the system and everything, the friendship in this, even though some of it is a little bit corny. Like the first 100 pages of this book is a little bit, it dragged a lot. It felt really slow, but once I get to the middle part of the book, towards the end, it gets really exciting. The last part of the book, however, is really crazy. Like, everything happened in the last 100 pages. A lot of twists, it's just an explosion of crazy stuff happened. And that ending leaves me wanting more for the second book, but since they haven't come out, this left me with a really big crave for another fantasy book. I just wanting more. Even though this is not the best book I've read in 2021, this will be one of the most memorable book that I've read in 2021 for sure, because of that reason, because it leads me to researching a lot of videos on YouTube about the best fantasy books, the best fantasy series. This leads me to discover a lot of my favorite YouTubers / booktuber. This leads me into a really big problem, which is buying books. And now all I want is buy more books and read more books. And I love reading, but I kind of fell out of love for a couple of years, and this book really re-sparked everything for me. So this will hold a very special place in my heart. And yeah, this was kind of unexpected, which is why I called it the biggest surprise. Next question is favorite new author, debut or new to you? Of course, I'm going to answer with Taylor Jenkins Reid. I truly think she is a phenomenal writer. Even before I finished Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, I already wanting more, and I immediately ordered Daisy Jones and the Six and Malibu Rising. But yeah, I just love the way she's telling all these stories about rich people and celebrity and their problems and everything. She's able to make them human in a lot of ways. We tend to forget that they are human. Sometimes when we see comments in celebrities' posts or something like that, people will, oh, but you're rich and you're celebrity, you're not allowed to have problems and everything and blah 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 blah. But that's not true. They're still human, they still have problems, just very different sets of problems than the rest of us who are not celebrity. Taylor able to convey that very well with her stories. We can see all the different sides, the glamorous sides, all the fame, the struggle and everything, how hard and how easy their life is, all the complexity and everything. I cannot relate to their life, but I can relate and understand their feelings very well through her writing, and she immediately became one of my absolute favorite author, and I can't wait to read the rest of the books that she's written. Next, newest fictional crush. I don't know. I think Elias from Ember in the Ashes series I really like because of how different he is from the rest of them. Even though growing up in this school, told to be cruel, they tried so hard to get rid of the good side, the good part of him, but at the end of the day, his true self win. He decides to be a good person, also very strong and kind and willing to sacrifice himself for people he loves, which is why I really like his character. But I also envision him physically very attractive, like just inside and out very attractive. Next, newest favorite character. I really want to say Evelyn Hugo, but I also think she's not the best character overall. She is very admiring, she knows what she wants, she go towards her dream, she stood up for herself many times, but at the same time, the things that I don't agree with made me not really want to put her as my favorite character, but she's such a complex one, so I think I will give a shout out to her. But I think Laia, I like her more than Evelyn Hugo. So Laia from Ember in the Ashes as well. She's just a very strong character. She's not selfish whatsoever. She always think about other people around her who she loves and put their need and their safety before her own. She's brave, she's quite humble, but she doesn't think highly of herself enough. In that way, I see myself in her a little bit, so which is why I like her character so much. She is such a family person, and I like to think myself as one, even though I don't think I'm as bold as her or as strong. But yeah, I really admire her character. Next question, book that made you cry. Like I said before, I'm not really a crier when I read. The only book that I can think of that made me close to tears is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, especially the middle towards the end part of the book. And also I think Crescent City. There was one part towards the end, the part where she met her best friend, quite emotional, and I really wanted to cry, so I think that one as well. Book that made you happy. I have a couple of different books. For some reason, I think of this book of something that made me smile the most. I don't know what it is. It's just a very light-hearted, heartwarming book to read, even though it's about anxious people. So the story is about a bank robbery that went wrong and turned into a heist situation. Turns out all the people in that heist actually linked to one another in some weird unexpected ways. And the story jumps back and forth between the police trying to find out who the culprit is, while we also able to see the cops' relationship, because the two cops that work in this case are father and son. Also the story of the background of the culprit, and also when the heist happened. As we go further into the story, we peel back layer by layer of the connection between all of these people. The topic in this book itself is not very light, but Frederick Beckman managed to make this book reads very light and easy and quite funny. Frederick is also one of the other authors that I really want to get into more in the future, because I think his writing is quite phenomenal. The way he tells his story is quite unique in my opinion. And I also have to say, this is the Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the illustrated version by Jim Kay. I read this book this year. I actually bought this book a couple of years ago. Since I bought this, I have only skipped through the pages rather quickly. I haven't even looked through all the illustrations very closely. I read this after my Dark Vanessa. It was quite a heavy read. I felt a little bit down afterwards, so I really need a pick-me-up. So I decided to finally pick this up and read this, and I'm glad that I did, because Harry Potter is one of my absolute comfort movies, books to watch and read. It's one of my favorite thing ever in the world. Reading this has always managed to lift my mood and my spirit, always makes me happy, especially the first one, because it's the introduction to the whole world and everything. Even though I've read and watched this series hundreds of times, I cannot count anymore at this point, but every time I pick this first book, it always felt like the very first time I'm reading and introduced to this world. And also this version is beautiful. Jim Kay did such an amazing job. This also gave a new view for the world. He didn't really follow the movie and how the actors look like and how the world looks like. He made his own interpretation, which is amazing. And besides, this is like the mixture of two of my favorite thing in the world, Harry Potter and watercolor illustrations. So this is like all I could ever ask for in a book. Most beautiful book you've bought so far this year? I have a couple answers. First, Crescent City, because of the intricacy of the illustration. All the details in here is amazing. I don't know, her looking very strong and complex. It really captured the spirit of the story really well in my opinion, and I also really like the color. This really gorgeous red with the gold and the yellow and everything. It's just one of the main reasons why I bought this book in the first place. Second is Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. I haven't read this one and I cannot wait to read this. I mean, this cover, she looks so strong, it looks striking, it looks magical. The foiling in this is holographic and it has silvery glittery sprayed edges. What more can I ask from a book? It's one of the most beautiful one. And the last for this answer is Six of Crows by Lee Bardugo, and this is the collector's edition with this black and metallic red foiling with the red sprayed edges. This is a hardcover obviously, and this also has a lot of beautiful illustrations of the characters, all the main characters in this book. It's just a really beautiful copy, and I'm glad that I picked this up instead of the regular one. I tend to say things over and over again. You probably only see 20 something minutes of the video or maybe more, but I've been sitting on this chair for hours, so I don't know how to edit this video later on. But finally we get into the last question. What books do you need to read by the end of the year? I have two in mind. Well, technically not two books, but the first one is series, and that is Shadow and Bone series. But overall, I think the Grisha first book. So basically Shadow and Bone trilogy, Six of Crows duology, and also King of Scars and Rule of Wolves. I don't know if I'm going to be able to read all 7 of them this year, but hopefully at least Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows, because I really want to watch the TV series on Netflix. I haven't been able to because I haven't read all of the these books, and I really don't want to spoil myself or ruining the books by watching the series first. And I really want to watch this series because I've heard some amazing things about that. And the second book that comes to my mind is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I read Circe early on this year and I quite liked that one, even though it's not really my favorite book. I gave it around 4 stars, 4.2, but I heard that this book is even better than that. I also heard that this book is very sad, emotional, and heartbreaking. I cannot wait to know all the hype. Maybe this will be the first book that can make me cry. So that's the last question for the book tag part, and now we'll get into all the books that I have read. I'm just going to quickly go through them, mention the book, and list all the info here and my scoring for the book, because if I'm going to talk about the books, the video will be 2 hours long. I'm going to list them chronologically based on when I finished the book, from January to June. The first book I've read in 2021 is City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. The second book I've read is the first book of Crescent City series, which is The House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. Third is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. Next is Anxious People by Frederick Beckman. Full Disclosure by Cameron Garrett. Serpent and Dove by Selby Mahorin. Next is the second book of Serpent and Dove series, which is Blood and Honey by Shelby Mahorin as well, of course. Next book I've read is The Sun is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. Circe by Madeline Miller. Finally, after 2 years of holding this off, this is the first time I've read them, I'm finally able to finish them. Next is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. I also reread The Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone in the Jim Kay illustrated version. The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. One of the best books I've read so far, which is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. The second book of the Ember in the Ashes series, which is A Torch Against the Night. I also read the third book in the series, which is A Reaper at the Gates. And that's it. Those are the books that I've read so far. Already have a really good progress since then, and I cannot wait to see where I will end up at the end of the year. Hopefully I will be able to reach at least 40 books, maybe even 50, who knows. I'm so excited for all the books that I have bought that I haven't read yet. I have some really amazing, promising books on my list, on my TBR, and I hope you like this video. If you do, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and maybe subscribe to my channel. That will help me and my channel a lot. If you want to list your answer to these questions as well, don't forget to leave a comment down below. I would love to know your answer, and also just tell me what is the best book you've read so far and the book you cannot wait to read for the rest of 2021. And lastly, I just want to say thank you so much for watching, and I hope I can see you in my next video. Bye guys.